Call.
And Vice Chair Sanchez, actually, I spoke slightly out of order. We're waiting for our IT room to tell us we're good to go.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah, we can wait.
And we're good to go.
Oh, okay. So let's call this meeting to order. The Planning Commission meeting of Thursday, November 5th, 2020. And let's start with the roll call.
Vice Chair Sanchez,
Present.
Commissioner Chavez,
Here.
Commissioner Dozier,
Here.
Commissioner Fearing,
Here.
Commissioner Meyer.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Wonderful. And Commissioner Chavez, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Yes, please join me in reciting our allegiance to the flag. Right hand over your heart. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United
of
States
the United
of America,
States of America,
and to the republic
and to the republic
stands
for which it stands,
one nation, under
one
God,
nation, under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
liberty and justice
with liberty
for
and
all.
justice for all.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Chavez. So the next item on the agenda is public comments on items not on the agenda. At this time, a person may address a planning commission on matters within the jurisdiction of the planning commission, including information, consent items, and any item not appearing on the agenda. The chair shall limit public comments to 3 minutes. The planning commissioner cannot take any item presented during public comments that is not on the agenda, and such item may only be referred to the commission secretary. Persons wishing to speak on public hearing items should do so at the time of the public hearing. And now review of the consent agenda.
And Vice Chair Sanchez, we did have one member of the public who would like to speak on items not on the agenda.
Okay. It's the best time at this point, isn't it?
Okay. And we are making the phone call now.
Thank you.
Hello,
Hello?
Henry.
Yes.
Hi, you're live on the Planning Commission and you have 3 minutes to speak.
Okay, perfect. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Hopefully, everyone's having a good night and being safe. The main agenda that really on my mind is I've been noticing a lot of homeless people everywhere I go. I could be ordering food at McDonald's, and right next to me, there could be somebody pissing on Saviors Road. I really strongly feel like we need to do something about this because it's getting to the point where I don't see it in any other cities but ours. And I feel like the main attraction in this city is River Park, that area. Honestly, the Southside Oxnard area looks like trash. It looks like that's where we put our dumpster trash at. I mean, if you drive down Saviors, you wouldn't even want to drive down there to take your family out. It's that horrible looking. I feel like we need to put a lot of resources in our communities and hold whoever owns these buildings where they rent out to everyone. I think we need to hold them accountable in fixing up these buildings on Saviors Road, everywhere in Oxnard. I mean, there's buildings that are open that should not even be open because they make Oxnard look really deteriorating. And if somebody can please tell me why houses out here are over $500,000, please. Because I'm moving in less than a year to Nevada because there's no way I'll be able to save $2,000 a month for my family because the houses out here are way too expensive and there's nothing out here. We don't own a football team, soccer team, baseball team. I mean, at the end of the day, if everybody really want to do something great for their city, We should really think about what other cities are doing and how much other people are paying, because the price of living out here, it's really, really doesn't make no sense. No sense. None. And if somebody can please tell me, why is it a 3-bedroom with 2 baths made in 1950, why is it worth $500,000? That house should be worth no more than $260,000 to $300,000 because it's already deteriorating. And another thing, we need to stop driving around all day acting like we don't see the homeless people out here. And it shouldn't be our job to call the police station every day. We need a vehicle to pick these people up. Anybody sleeping outside is not in their right mind. They need to be in a mental hospital. I don't think they're out there just sleeping. They're out there doing drugs, because the real people are in shelters getting help. And that's all I have to say today.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you, guys. I very much appreciate you guys a lot. I do. Thank you, guys all.
Have a good
God
evening.
bless. You too.
Okay, the next item on the,
Vice Chair Sanchez,
yes,
this is Commissioner Chavez. I just, and maybe I have to look to our council, but is it appropriate to just make a couple of comments and ask staff questions without getting into a detailed discussion about the speaker's comments?
Commissioner Chavez, this is Scott Kolwitz. Because the item's not on the agenda, we actually can't engage in the comments. It's simply for a public speaker to share their comments with the Planning Commission. The chair is always able to schedule a future item to potentially discuss something that would be in the purview of the commission. That's an option that we would eventually have. But as far as this meeting, we don't have the ability to engage in that conversation.
Okay, thank you.
okay. We will continue with item E, ex parte declarations for public hearing. Has anybody had any conversation or been approached by any company or what have you that is on the item agenda tonight?
No.
No,
No ex parte communications.
thank you.
No.
Chavez, no.
No.
And no for me also. Okay, so we go next to the number F, which is continued public hearing. And we do have the project name Verizon Danube on the agenda.
Okay. Vice Chair Sanchez, thank you very much for having us tonight. This is Scott Kolbitz again. I'm going to introduce this item briefly to all of you and then turn it over to Jay Dobrowski. He's our staff planner who's been assigned to this project. So as far as what this project is, a quick reading of the agenda. It's a special use permit that's being requested tonight, PZ number 1853001. A request to construct a 47-foot tall wireless communication facility designed as a faux eucalyptus tree with an associated equipment enclosure within a 596 square foot lease area adjacent to an existing 3-story self-storage facility located on a 1.02 acre lot in the general commercial plan development overlay, known as a C2 zone. Pursuant to Oxnard City Code, section 16497, the request includes an increase in height from 35 feet to 47 feet and a reduction to the rear yard setback from 15 feet to 10 feet. The project is located adjacent to the southeastern corner of the public storage facility located at 161 Ventura Boulevard. The project has been filed by Scott Donaway and Verizon Wireless. That team is here and we'll have a presentation for you in a little bit following the staff presentation. But to start off tonight, this project has been on your agenda for quite some time. So I wanted to acknowledge that as we've tried to work with the applicant team to bring something forward to you that we could all support. The project that we have tonight, there is a staff recommendation to approve the project subject to conditions. But I do want to be transparent with you as well as the applicant team that the city and the applicant team aren't quite seeing the recommended approval in the same light. So in that sense, whenever we're reviewing a wireless project, there are essentially three different things that staff is balancing. You could think of it as a three-legged stool if it helps you mentally picture this. One item is essentially the signal. The wireless industry is trying to provide as much signal as possible, and staff definitely supports that. There's been a lot of wireless projects throughout the community that we've approved and continue to approve. So availability of signal and strength of signal is one of those three legs. A second component is related to health, if you will. The FCC has given us some strict guidelines as to what we can and cannot regulate. So we do look at that as part of our review. And the third aspect is aesthetics. What does the wireless facility look like within our community? And as we try to balance those things, more often than not, we find a place that we're in agreement with the wireless industry. And tonight so happens to be one of those rare projects that we have a difference of opinion, if you will. So with that as a brief introduction and kind of thinking about those three issue areas that we're trying to balance, I'm going to turn the conversation over to Jay Doborowski to take you through the history of this project, to bring us all back up to speed on it, as well as to show you what the applicant is requesting, as well as what our recommendation to you is. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jay.
Thank you, Mr. Kolwitz. Good evening, Vice Chair Sanchez, members of the Planning Commission. The item before you is the Verizon Danube project. Mr. Kolwitz gave you a pretty good introduction. It is a request to construct a 47-foot tall wireless communications facility designed as a faux eucalyptus tree. It includes 2 deviations to the development standards of the C2 zoning. The first is an increase in height, and the second is a reduction in the rear yard setback. For those of you watching at home, we're pulling up the screen right now. And we're live. Here's the project description. The project site is located in the El Rio neighborhood, and it is next to a public storage building. The site has a general plan designation of commercial general and a zoning designation of general commercial plan development. The project is adjacent to a public storage building and the roadway right-of-way. The road is Financial Square on the bottom of the screen. The faux tree is located on the Financial Square side of the building, and the equipment area is located in the rear of the building. Here's another aerial view of the facility located on the southernmost corner of the building. The project site is surrounded by a shopping center, condos, office buildings, and Highway 101. The project site is located at the end of Financial Square. Note the row of landscape trees located along the side of the building. The project requires the removal of one of the existing landscape trees. The proposed tree and the equipment area are located adjacent to an existing trash enclosure. A little history on the site. In 2003, the site was developed with the existing self-storage building. In 2015, the Planning Commission approved a wireless communications facility. Proposed by Verizon, it was designed as an architectural feature. That facility was never built, and the permit expired. The city has approved many other wireless communications facilities throughout the city with various different designs. The 2015 facility was designed to look like a part of the self-storage building. That's the parapet wall at the front of the building. In 2019, your commission considered this current proposal. The item was continued so that the applicant could provide additional information. I will discuss the applicant's response to that request during the presentation. This is another aerial view of the project site. The facility, as it's proposed, can be seen from Ventura Boulevard. The proposed facility is prominently visible from the roadway. Planning staff recommends that the facility be located behind the building so that it is not as visible, and also that new trees are not introduced into the existing landscaping. The staff recommended location is about 50 feet north on the other side of the equipment shelter. The facility would be located right behind the building. The applicant team indicated that a facility in that location must be at least 77 feet tall. Based on the evidence submitted, staff feels that a lower height will achieve coverage. Thus, staff recommends that your commission approve a 57-foot tall facility that may be increased to 69 feet, subject to planning manager approval in consultation with a third-party licensed subject matter expert. The 77-foot facility would be visible from Ventura Boulevard. Note that only the top portion is visible. That's behind the building on the right side of the screen. The faux tree would be taller than the existing landscape trees. Thus, staff recommends that 2 live trees be planted near the faux tree. Staff has evaluated coverage maps provided for the facility at various heights. The coverage gap seems to be filled with the 50-foot high facility. The coverage incrementally increases as the facility gets taller. The coverage appears to be the same for the proposed location and the recommended location. At this point, I'm going to scroll back and forth so that you can see the coverage maps. Note the difference in the green area. At 40 feet, it's a little smaller. As the facility increases in height, the green area gets larger. The applicant submitted diagrams showing coverage to a mobile device at the adjacent intersection. At the proposed location, the facility has a clear line of sight to the mobile device on the corner. At the recommended location, the facility signal must pass over the adjacent building. At the original height of 40 feet, very little signal gets to the mobile device. At a 50-foot height, the signal can reach the mobile device. At a height of 62 feet and also 70 feet, more signal can reach the mobile device. At those heights, the signal has a clear line of sight to the mobile device at the intersection. Staff notes that the mobile device may be moving throughout the network, and other existing wireless communications facilities can provide coverage throughout the network. As proposed, the facility is prominently visible on the side of the building. As recommended, the facility is partly screened and blends in with the existing treescape. This is a comparison of the visibility of both designs. The proposed design requires a reduction in the rear yard setback due to the construction requirements of the facility. The proposed design also requires an increase in the maximum height to provide coverage. The proposed site would be more visible and introduce a new species of tree to the existing landscape. The recommended site would be less visible and would preserve the existing landscaping along Financial Square. The recommended site is about 50 feet to the north behind the facility. The recommended design also requires an increase in height. Staff recommends that your commission approve a height of 57 feet that may be increased to 69 feet, subject to planning manager approval. The recommended design also requires a reduction in the rear yard setback due to the same construction restraints. The project will be subject to conditions of approval. The conditions require the applicant to demonstrate the need for an increase in height, installation of landscaping, and the continued maintenance of the stealth design. This project was reviewed for potential environmental impacts. Since the facility represents a small structure, it can be found exempt from CEQA. The proposed project was presented to the El Rio neighborhood at a community workshop. At that workshop, no one commented on the proposed project. Staff has received 2 public comments from the applicant team. The first is an email from the applicant objecting to 2 conditions of approval. The second is a letter from an engineering firm detailing the construction constraints of the previous 2015 design of the facility. Staff recommends that your commission approve an alternate version of the proposed project with a maximum height of 57 feet that may be increased to 69 feet. Staff also recommends that you find the project categorically exempt from CEQA and approve a resolution for the special use permit. That concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions. The applicant team is also with us and can answer questions.
Are there any questions or comments by the commissioners? And thank you very much for your presentation. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Commissioner Chavez?
I wasn't sure how we were doing this, so I'll just raise my hand. Thank you, Mr. Dabrowski, for the presentation and the updates. As Mr. Kolowitz said, this has been a project that has been on our agenda for a long time now. A few of the comments that you made was that this would be introducing a new tree species to the area and that it wouldn't fit in to what currently is where they're proposing at. The height of those current trees is how tall are those current trees that this would actually make it noticeable of what they're requesting to place it at?
Yes, Commissioner Chavez, the existing public storage building is 35 feet high. The existing landscape trees are also 35 feet high.
Okay, so their proposed that they were originally proposing was to only go up to 40, right? Or 45 originally. Yes. And yes, if I remember correctly, before a holiday, city staff rejected that and ended up recommending that it be placed behind the building, correct?
To answer your question on the landscape trees, yes, I've just pulled them up there on the screen. This photo shows the existing landscape trees and then the proposed site located behind the building in the staff recommended location.
And if I could add one quick note, in addition to the exhibit on the screen, your planning packet also includes, as part of attachment A, it's the maps. It includes heights of other trees that are in the general location. Closer to, between the northbound 101 off-ramp and Ventura Road, there's a series of eucalyptus trees that are in that location that range anywhere from 74 feet to 85 feet tall. And then on Financial Square itself, there's trees that are between 33 and 62 feet tall. So in the overall area, there are taller trees, but specifically on the project site, the trees are not as tall as the building.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Mr. Dworowski, one of the concerns that were brought up when this project was first brought up to us was the distance between the proposed project and the street light there. Was that a concern of city staff when the project first came before them?
Yes, Commissioner Chavez, staff has requested an EME report which outlines the effects of the proposed facility on the adjacent streetlight. And that's also included in the staff report. That's attachment.
Now, if you don't mind, if you just, for any viewers that we may have, if you can just say for the record what the report, summarize what that report said.
Yes, that's right, Commissioner Chavez. The proposed report outlines that the facility as proposed by Verizon, that's the 47-foot tall facility located adjacent to the corner of the building and the streetlight, would have occupational hazards to those working up on the roof of the building. And the effects were also much greater to those on the streetlight. However, effects on the streetlight did not exceed FCC standards. Conversely, the proposed location that is located 50 feet north behind the building was demonstrated in the report that did not have any significant effects on either workers on the rooftop or workers on the streetlight.
Okay. Now, it was mentioned in the beginning that the applicant was not too pleased with the staff's report. Maybe I misunderstood that. If not, can you elaborate a little bit about that? Unless they're going to give a presentation, and then I'll just hold off on that.
Yes, the applicant does have a presentation.
Okay, then I'll just hold off on that comment. At this time, that's it. Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you, staff.
Are there any other comments or questions by the planning commissioners?
I have a question.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kolwitz. A question about the cell tower itself is, so the proposed site and the recommended site looks like the coverage is about the same, pretty similar. Is that with current technology, or does that include use for 5G? Or does it matter?
So Commissioner Fearig, I'm showing on the screen there some coverage maps, and staff has found that the coverage maps look essentially the same. for the proposed location and also the staff recommended location.
Mhm.
The coverage maps would be the similar regardless of a 4G or a 5G. That's staff's
Okay.
understanding, but the applicant can speak more to that.
Great, thank you.
Vice Chair Chavez, if I could speak.
Yes, go ahead, Commissioner Myers.
Thank you. Yes, and Mr. Dabrowski, and maybe the applicant might even be able to speak to this too, but it does strike me as odd that from one location 50 feet south, we'd have a need for a tree that's 47 feet, but at 50 feet north of that, we need a tree that could be as tall as 69 feet. Is that consideration something to provide something that's more pleasing to the applicant as a potential for a taller tree that could provide superior coverage to the applicant's preferred location?
Yes, Commissioner Meyer. The applicant team has indicated that at the staff proposed location, the facility would need to be 77 feet tall. The applicant team has not demonstrated that need, and that is outlined in the staff report. The applicant team can speak more to that.
And if I could add to that, there is a letter, we described it as the unsigned narrative that was attached to your staff report that discussed that the 77-foot tall facility would also provide opportunities for a co-location of another facility on the tree. And a quick description from our understanding working over the years with the wireless industry, you have the antennas that are on the trees are generally between 8 and 10 feet tall, and you need a separation between the antennas of 10 feet. So if you are designing something to be co-located, then you're building additional height into the tree. And as we looked at the RF models that are on the screen that have been shared with you, a tree which is 77 feet tall would certainly give great coverage, but something that would be shorter than that, as the 57-foot recommendation that we're proposing, could also provide enhanced coverage in the area, but it doesn't, it would not provide the opportunity for co-location. So in staff's eyes, the taller tree, by and large, seems like it's being proposed for the purposes of co-location.
I see. And does staff see the 69-foot max as something that could provide that potential for co-location?
That, in terms of math, that probably doesn't work that well for co-location. The 69-foot height difference, what we're trying to work out and have essentially as a buffer is the report that had been provided to us, the FCC energy report or health report, shows that at 47 feet, there is an exceedance of occupational standards, if you will, on top of the roof. So as a process, as we try to balance that three-legged stool, we're trying to protect future workers that might go up on the roof. And we support increasing the height of the tree so workers on the roof itself would be safe. So that's where we're seeing the increase in height from the 47 feet up to a higher level. We have repeatedly asked the Verizon applicant team to provide a study which indicates what's the minimum height necessary for the antenna facilities to provide a healthy, clean level, if you will, for folks that are on the roof. And we have not yet received that from Verizon over the course of this application. So as part of the condition, one of the elements that we included was that the city essentially brings on a third-party subject matter expert who can model that for us and verify independently what the minimum height really is to allow workers on the roof to not be exposed to anything that exceeds the FCC standards.
Understood. Thank you, Mr. Kolwitz.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments by the planning commissioners? No? Okay. I just had a question. I was thinking more, the taller it is, you know, the more coverage and less of these trees. I don't see them as, you know, you look at one and you don't say, oh, this is beautiful. It's, you know, it's for a purpose to get the coverage out there, you know, and I haven't seen one of those where you could say, wow, they really fooled us. You can't tell. But other than that, you know, probably the taller you can get more college, you know, I mean, get more coverage. And but that's just my opinion. I'm not sure the opinion of everybody else.
Vice Chair, I did have a few questions I'd like to ask.
Go ahead, Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you. My question was first to staff. Does both locations proposed and recommended offer the same level of safety?
Commissioner Dozier, as far as the level of safety goes, that's outlined in the EMA report attached to the staff report. As previously stated, the proposed facility that is proposed by Verizon would pose a health and safety hazard to workers on the roof of the adjacent building and would cause a greater risk to those on top of the streetlight that's also adjacent to the facility. The staff recommended location, that's 50 feet north, would not pose those hazards as indicated in the EMA report.
Okay, so staff's recommendation, isn't that the one that's closest to the facility, the building, or is it the one that stands out by itself?
Commissioner Dozier, I've brought up on the screen the image of the proposed facility. That's the Verizon proposed location.
Right.
On the corner of the building adjacent to the streetlight.
Right.
The staff recommended location is behind the building. So that's 50 feet to the north.
Okay. So if I understand your comments, the proposed location has greater health risks or safety risks to people working on the roof, or do I have that backwards? And is it the staff recommended location that would propose a greater safety risk to people working on the roof?
Commissioner Dozier, I'll respond to that. It's a matter of both location as well as height. So if the tree is 47 feet tall in either location, there would be risk to those that are on the roof in particular. If it moves to if there's a taller facility that's located, then there would be less risk to those that would be on the roof. And as we're trying to balance that three-legged stool again, staff would support the notion of the tree being located behind the building because it gives the most aesthetic screening from the public right-of-way, and allow the height to be increased for the tree to maintain safety compliance with safety standards as adopted by the FCC. So we are looking for an increase in height really in either location. At the end of the day, staff just believes the location behind the building offers additional benefit in terms of aesthetic screening.
And okay, and the staff recommended location reduce or eliminates the requirement to remove an existing tree?
That is accurate.
Okay.
Well, actually, let me reverse on that slightly. There might be landscaping modifications that happen on the back of the building with the image that's on the screen today. Uh, there is some landscaping there that would be modified, but it's not as prominent as the landscaping that's along Financial Square. Financial Square has a very regular rhythm of a particular tree, and staff's, and Jay's going back to that imagery right now. There would be, if we modify the landscaping behind the building, there would be less interruption from the public right of way than there would be if we modified the landscaping that's adjacent to the right of way.
Okay. And it was my understanding from the presentation also that line of sight in the recommended is coverage would not be impacted anymore via line of sight from the recommended location to the proposed location. They're both, the coverage looks like it would still be the same. My follow on to that is, does that also apply with future proofing this project? Meaning, I know that this tower can become a shared resource with other competition or other telephone companies if they choose to also try to increase their coverage in the area. So would both proposed and recommend location be able to accommodate any future sharing requests from other telephone companies?
So Commissioner Dozier, it sounds like there's actually two different questions that are in your question. So let me try to unpack both of those.
Okay.
So the first question essentially had to do with coverage, and is there a substantial difference from one proposal to the next? Is it in effect what you are asking?
If there is a difference because of line of sight.
Right.
So in my an example would be in the staff's recommended location, the area of coverage that is facing away from the antenna will receive, the building would seem to be in the way of a portion of that tower. I don't know how high up on the tower the antennas will reside. So that's why I said I was asking if the line of sight would impact either or would be impacted by the staff's recommended location.
Okay, well, so the answer to that is with the applicant's proposal, they provide this diagram to us. And line of sight's an interesting thing because it's talking about a specific direction from one location to another.
Mhm.
And the functionality of a wireless facility, of a mobile device, is that it's moving in space. So at some point in time, in some place in space, there will always be some level of line of sight interference depending on where one is measuring the antenna to the mobile device. So in staff's review, we're really finding those to be equivalent, if you will. It just depends where the mobile device is. And the whole notion of a cellular network is indeed, it's a network. So we're looking for enhanced signal to go out to connect to those devices and to essentially hand off from one to the next as a device would move through space.
Okay.
In terms of the second question, and sorry, I just lost my train of thought here. If you can help me along with that.
For its future proofing it, if there were shared as a shared resource with other telephone companies.
Sure. And thank you for that prompt and reminder. All facilities, all wireless facilities, once they're established, have the ability to allow other co-location and increase their height. So essentially what we're identifying today and establishing would be the minimum height that we could allow. A wireless carrier could come forward in the future and ask for what's called the 6409 approval. It's a reference to a tax code amendment that had been made of all places. And that provision allows for an additional increase in height, provided that the new facility or the extended facility to allow for co-location and other devices would be consistent with the underlying conditions and screening built into the conditions of approval for the what's called the base facility. So what you're reviewing and approving tonight would be the base facility. So anything that would come forward after this would need to comply with the conditions that are included in the resolution today.
Okay, and my final question is, are there any other examples that you know of throughout the city that are like the proposed location, meaning, you know, standing out by itself, not really hidden or concealed by a facility?
Commissioner Dozier, the Planning Commission did approve recently another Verizon wireless facility located in the Rose Santa Clara specific plan area. That's in the commercial area right next to the auto center. And that was a standalone faux eucalyptus tree. And it was located adjacent to a warehouse building. And your commission also approved 2 live eucalyptus trees, and that would help blend in the faux tree with the existing treescape.
Right. Okay. I remember that project. Okay, that answers all my questions. Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you, staff, for a great presentation.
You. Are there any other questions or comments from planning commissioners? Okay, Commissioner Chavez.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Last question for staff. If the applicant was to be able to keep what they are proposing to place that, is there any type of remedy that could protect city workers that are working on the light or any other employee that's working on top of that roof? Or, you know, it is what it is?
So if I could, Commissioner Chavez, if I could help start to address that one. Attachment K to the staff report is the EME report, and it includes some recommended compliance measures for employees that would be on the roof. And such things that are suggested in that report, it wouldn't fully prevent something from occurring, but there are items that include RF safety training to be included. There could be potential physical things, walks, if you will, to the roof. There's potential for barriers or other sort of painted limits, if you will, on the roof, essentially acting as a caution, don't step over this line type of thought process. But that does require ongoing maintenance, and it would require someone knowing what those are even there for, to know that they are supposed to have the ongoing maintenance or the ongoing training, and to know if the roof is repaired over the time, that the line or other barriers or something is supposed to go back into play. So staff's perspective that we're bringing to the table essentially is a long-term view, and that we feel for the safety of anyone going up on the rooftop in particular, a higher tree makes more sense to us because it just protects folks for a longer term period of time.
Thank you for that from Mr. Kolowitz. Mr. Dubowski, there was a slide on here. I want to say maybe it's 12 that kind of has a side view of the storage building. Let me see as you are scrolling through it. Right there, 13, sorry, 13. Where it says previously approved, and this is me channeling former Vice Chair Chua, when it comes to these towers, the previously approved site was to have it kind of blend into it. Now, maybe this is a question for you, or maybe this is a question for the applicant, but why isn't the previously approved viable anymore for this project?
Commissioner Chavez, the previously approved facility was designed as an architectural feature. It was located on the roof of the self-storage building, and it's staff's understanding that the building itself would have to be retrofitted with a new roof and support structures. And so the applicant indicates it was prohibitively expensive.
Got it. Okay. Thank you, staff. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Are there any other questions or comments? No? Do we have a report or a presentation by the applicant?
Vice Chair Sanchez, we do, and Dee is pulling that up for the applicant. While we're doing that, if the applicant team wants to introduce themselves, that would be great, and then the floor will be theirs.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Sanchez, or good evening, and members of the commission. Let me make sure, okay, I'm live. I'm Kevin Sullivan. I'll be presenting for Verizon tonight. Verizon also has a very large team available to answer any questions and address issues that come up. They include the site acquisition or planning consultant, RF engineers, we got civil engineers, and then we have an EME expert who prepared multiple reports for this site. So while I'll not be able to answer all of the questions that are likely to come up based on comments from commissioners already, we do have, again, a pretty large team available to address issues. If you're ready, I'll go ahead and start. If you go next slide, please. Next again. Next again. Right, so here's just a view of the general area around the site. You can see the public storage building in the middle of the slide, and the Verizon proposed location is on that southeast corner. You can also see kind of an overlay of the three sectors of antennas that Verizon is proposing. And at this, what I'll call the Verizon proposed location at the southeast corner, none of those sectors are shooting over or across the building. Next slide, please. Here is a site plan. You can see the proposed new faux tree at the southeast corner of the public storage building. And just to the north of that is an equipment enclosure that's 6 feet wide by 25 feet long by 7 feet high. There'll be a 7-foot high solid wall around the equipment enclosure to screen all of that equipment. Just to touch briefly with respect to some of the EME or RF energy issues, the facility fully complies with the FCC health safety standards with respect to RF energy at both ground level and at the top of the light pole that's nearby with Verizon's proposed location. And then there are also other standards, they're called occupational standards, that our EME expert can address that mitigate or limit health safety risks with respect to people up on the top of the building. I will note that rooftop facilities, wireless facilities, are fairly common. And so these issues about ensuring RF safety come up all the time. Again, there are very specific FCC standards that are applied and mitigation measures that are typically and frequently used to ensure the health safety of anybody on the roof. Next slide, please. I'm sorry, also, I'll just real briefly on the previously approved site, Verizon did get a different design at the same location previously approved. After the approval was provided or issued by the city, that's when the more detailed kind of engineering analysis, including structural engineering analysis occurred. And it was determined at that point that to support this pretty large rooftop addition to the building, there would have to be, significant structural enhancements that would be very invasive to the occupied storage uses and also would be prohibitively expensive. And we've got someone from our team, Bill Desmond, that is able to address those issues more if you want. I'll also note that Mr. Desmond sent into the city on October 10th of this year a 3-page letter that explains in detail the reasons why the previous approval had to be abandoned because of these significant costs and adverse impacts from structural enhancements for the previous design. Next, please. Here's some information that, some general information about the increased demand for wireless services. In our country, we've got 240 million 911 calls that are made annually. About 80% of those calls are made from wireless devices. 90% of US households use wireless devices. The uses and the number of connected devices are growing all the time, and demands on wireless networks to grow and address both coverage and capacity issues are also growing. Next slide, please. Here's some additional information about expanding use of wireless networks. Mobile data traffic per smartphone is going to rise from 7 gigs to in 2018 to 39 gigs in 2024. That's a 5.5 time increase in the span of 6 years. 57% of American households are now using only wireless devices, not landlines, for voice services. And we've got 31 billion connected wireless devices in the country, are estimated by 2023. Next, please. Wireless devices are also increasingly being used in education. 600 or more school districts have replaced textbooks with tablets in the classroom. And we know that children and high school students, college students significantly use their wireless devices for educational purposes. And the use of wireless devices in telemedicine is also growing significantly, especially during COVID times. People can monitor blood pressure, EKG issues, things like that through their wireless devices. And also now an increasing number of medical appointments are being handled via telemedicine and wireless devices. All of this requires that wireless carriers networks grow, expand, and deal with these increasing capacity issues. Next, please. Next again, please. So here's a little overview of the area. Right in the middle is the proposed Danube site. Up to the northwest is an existing site, Nyland. And down kind of just almost south of Danube is another site, Murado. Those are the key sites in the network that, that the Danube facility, if approved, will address. As we're going to see coming up in some other slides, the Danube site is going to be filling some coverage gaps in the area, but also, just as importantly, it's going to be relieving some capacity stresses that are being experienced in particular by the Nyland site and the Murado site. Next slide, please. So here's the existing coverage in Verizon's wireless network. You can see the Danube site right in the middle. It's not turned on. And the colors that we have here is, the gray that you see is no reliable coverage. Kind of the blue or the teal is poor coverage. Yellow is no reliable in-building or reliable in-car coverage, although you may get some coverage. And then green is the Verizon network objective, which is reliable in-building and in-car coverage. And you can see kind of right in the middle of this slide, we've got a gap, a pretty significant gap with respect to the network objective of getting green coverage. Next, please. Here you can see that with the Danube site approved, we fill in a lot of missing green and turn a lot of non-reliable in-building and in-vehicle coverage. We turn that green, and we're achieving a significant part of Verizon's network coverage objectives in the area with this proposed Danube location. So part of the network need for the facility, again, we've got to address the significant gap in coverage and capacity in the area network. The site will provide an increase in reliable in-building and in-vehicle coverage, and the site provides increased capacity for the area, all of which, both coverage and capacity enhancements, are going to correct failed call attempts, dropped calls, poor call quality, and slow data speeds. All of this is explained, by the way, in detail in the Verizon RF engineer letter that's dated July 20 of 2020. It was submitted to the city, and it's attachment L to your staff report. Next slide, please. This is just a slide that shows the Danube facility standalone or by itself without the other network sites. Next, please. Now this slide is a graph that shows dominance plots with the existing sites. And what we see here is with the Nyland facility kind of up on the center top left, you've got a very dark pink sector that is covering a pretty significant area toward the Danube site, which is shown as non-existent or non-operational in this slide. And then also down below, you've got the Morado site to the south with kind of a light pink sector shooting up toward the Danube facility. And both of those are covering a very large geographical area, which means that they're having to deal with a lot of data processing, and it's overtaxing the Nyland and Morado sectors' capacity capabilities. Next slide, please. This slide shows the improvements in capacity issues for the network if the Danube facility is operational. You can see that Nyland sector, the kind of dark pink sector, is significantly shrunk back. Its geographic area is reduced, which means it now has the operational capability to deal with all the capacity demands that it has. The same is true with the Morado facility, and the light pink sector or area down below, that's shrunk back significantly. And so the couple of sectors of the Danube facility provide significant capacity relief for Verizon's network in the area. So the Danube facility really balances out network capacity capabilities. Next, please. Here's an aerial view that shows the Danube facility at Verizon's preferred location at the southeast corner of the building. And you can see the line of sight to a mobile device out on Ventura Boulevard. If you were to take a direct line from the proposed Danube location out to the edge of pavement for Ventura Boulevard, you're about 260 feet away. So you're almost a football field away from Ventura Boulevard, where you're going to have the significant drive-by traffic. You'll also see here that all three sectors of the Danube facility are pointed away. So all three antenna sectors with 4 antennas apiece, they're pointed away from the building. They're not shooting over the building, and therefore they're not experiencing any signal interference related to the building. The building on this eastern side, there's a parapet wall there that goes up to 36 feet. And so again, with the Verizon proposed location and with the orientation of the three sectors, we don't get any interference from the building. And that's not the situation we have with the city's proposed location, as we'll talk about later. And again, our EME expert is available to discuss his report and also the mitigation measures that can be used to comply with the FCC health safety standards with respect to the occupational standards for anybody who's going to be on the roof, and also the existing compliance with FCC health safety standards for anybody that would be working on the nearby streetlight or at ground level. Next, please. You'd seen this slide before. This is basically a depiction of the proposed Verizon location at the southeast corner. There's no building in the way. We have what's called a RAD center. The RF engineers, I guess, can tell you exactly what that means, but lay people understand that to be, it's the center of antenna. So the top of antenna would be 44 feet, the center of antenna is 40 feet, and with no building obstruction in the area, you're able to get a clear line of sight. The antenna sectors are all tilted downward a little bit. They don't shoot up or directly out to the horizon, and that's because people who are using wireless devices are at ground level. And so, as we're going to see later with the city proposed location, we do have some significant line of sight issues and some significant RF signal interference issues by having to shoot across the roof, but those don't exist in the Verizon proposed location. Next, please. Here's a photo of an actual existing operational faux eucalyptus tree that Verizon has. I don't know exactly where this location is, but I've seen similar photos at some other sites. This is what we're proposing the tree to look like. The photo sims themselves don't do justice, and so we thought that we would show this actual photo of an operational faux euc facility. And you can see that the antennas are, very well screened here, have, very good design of this, and our proposed facility, faux eucalyptus facility, will blend in nicely with a number of other eucalyptus trees in the area and a number of tall trees that are in the area as acknowledged by the city. Next, please. So here's a photo sim. I wish we could have used a photo that the city showed earlier, where all of these trees from Ventura Boulevard back to the southeast corner are a lot bigger, a lot more full, and in reality provide a lot more screening than when this photo sim was taken. But again, we've got about 260 feet from the edge of pavement right there at the eastern edge of pavement of Ventura Boulevard back to the southeast corner. And as shown in this slide, and then more pronounced in the city slide, there are a number of very mature trees in that line back to the southeast corner that provide significant screening for our proposed facility. Next, please. Here's the facility looking at it from the, or looking toward the northwest. Again, if you can picture the actual installed eucalyptus tree that was in a previous slide there, and also the very mature kind of grown-up trees shown in the city slide, you could see that Verizon's proposed facility will integrate and blend in visually very well in the area. Next, please. Here's a photo sim from Ventura Boulevard, or even on the other side, western side of Ventura Boulevard, looking back across the public storage facility, and you can, barely see a couple of branches from the top of the tree at the Verizon proposed location. Next, please. And then here's just a slide looking southwest at the location. And next slide, please. So we're going to get in now to the city proposed location. The city staff talked or showed you the slides of the coverage maps at various heights, saying that the, even a lower height than the 77-foot tall facility that Verizon has explained it needs in the area. If we're going to go to the city preferred location, the city is saying you can go lower that height and get the same coverage footprint. That's not true. Verizon uses an RF prediction tool called ATOL. That's what produces the coverage plots. There's some general information in ATOL about building materials, thickness of walls, a lot more about topography and terrain. But what this software tool doesn't do is it's not able to tell you the actual height and actual width and actual location of a building in an area. That information needs to be supplemented with RF engineering analysis, which we had provided here. Again, in attachment L to the staff report, which is a July 20 of this year letter from a Verizon RF engineer with 23 years of experience, he explained that there's going to be some significant interference in the RF signal if Verizon's proposed facility is moved to the city preferred location and it doesn't have the adequate height, which would be 77 feet of total facility height. So again, that was all explained. And the limitation in the ATOL, coverage propagation map software was also explained to staff. We told staff that the RF signal mapping tool can't account for the adverse effect on the signal of the building that is immediately adjacent to the site. We provided that information to staff on September 8th of this year in an email, and the email reads as follows. As previously explained to the city, the tool that produces the propagation maps cannot pick up the signal interference caused by the immediately adjacent building at the city's suggested alternative location. Therefore, the coverage maps with different height antennas at the two different locations will look substantially similar, but the facility at the city proposed location will not actually provide comparable coverage footprints due to the building height as shown on the maps. And so again, we followed up on the explanation provided by our RF engineer to the city in his July 20th letter, a detailed explanation. We followed up with this information on September 8th, and we're going to talk about it some more tonight. So again, you have to, when we're taking a look at the city preferred location, we need to understand that the antennas have some down tilt. Again, the devices that we're trying to reach are at ground level. So the facility at the city preferred location is going to be shooting across about 116 feet of roof for that one sector that's going to be going out and covering a segment of Highway 101 and also providing the capacity relief for the sectors of the Nyland facility and the Murado facility. So unless the antennas are high enough, RF signal interference is going to occur. And again, this was explained in the July 20th letter from our 23-year experienced RF engineer. There's a couple of detailed paragraphs about that at page 4, and also some exhibits 7 through 9 to that letter that explained all of this information. And that letter again is attached as attachment L to the staff report. Next slide, please. So here is the facility at the city preferred location, about 50 feet north from the southeast corner of the building. And we've got a key orientation of that kind of gray or lavender sector that's shooting out to the southwest, providing coverage, needed coverage for Highway 101 and the commercial corridors on both sides of it, as well as providing capacity relief for those certain sectors of Nyland and Murado. And we're having to shoot across a significant amount of roof and a parapet wall that is 36 feet high. So the line of sight here is pretty significantly impacted. Next slide, please. Here, again, these are all graphs that show the facility at the city preferred location, 50 feet north of the southeast corner. If we're to go with a center of antennas at 40 feet, which is what Verizon's proposed facility would have, we're shooting directly into the building. We've got zero line of sight. There's complete signal interference. That's up at the top. And part of it, the RF engineers explained to me, and made sense to me, and maybe it will to you, that these antennas and their RF signal are a lot like a flashlight. If you took a flashlight and you wanted to shine it across a table, but reach something directly, below, immediately adjacent to the table on the far side, you have to elevate up and get some height for the light signal to reach there. And the same thing is true with our antennas and the RF signal. If we're going to be able to reach the devices that are on the ground, we've got to have appropriate line of sight. And so if we go to the bottom of this slide here, if we have antennas with middle of antennas at 50 feet, the top lobe or portion of the antennas may be able to sneak over the building roof and edge, but the center of antennas and the bottom lobe are going to be directly hitting the roof, and we're going to get significant signal interference. Next, please. Even if we were to raise the antennas, middle of antennas up to 62 feet, which would give us 66 feet top of antennas, you still are going to see that the bottom lobe of the antennas are going to be shooting across 116 feet of roof, and we're going to be losing signal. And so down at the bottom, you can see that if we're really going to be getting all of the appropriate and optimum use out of these antennas and maximizing our RF signal and limiting the number of macro sites that we're going to need in the city, we've got to elevate up the center of antennas to 70 feet. That's where we're able to get some clear line of sight for the signal to be able to propagate out to adequately fill the coverage gap and address the capacity stress concerns that we have. We need this height, center of antennas at 70 feet, which would produce a total top end height of the facility, the faux tree at 77 feet. That's what we need to be able to replicate the same coverage footprint and the same capacity stress relief that we'd be able to achieve with a 47-foot facility, 30 feet lower at the southeast corner. Next, please. This is a photo sim, again, from Ventura Boulevard, looking to the northeast. This is the city preferred location if the facility was 77 feet high, and you can just see, the tops of the tree there, and not any significant exposure from Ventura Boulevard. So we're happy to answer questions you have, and I'm sure you're going to have some. And fortunately, we've got a good team here. But Verizon's request of the Planning Commission is that it approve the 47-foot facility at the southeast corner of the building. That's the preferred project because it's only 47 feet high and achieves Verizon's coverage and capacity relief objectives, as opposed to a 77-foot high facility that we would need at the city preferred location. Verizon's preferred location is 260 feet away from the nearest edge of Ventura Boulevard. There are limited views of the facility from that busy street. We've got a good design, as we showed you, with the actual faux eucalyptus tree installed in the field with some very good screening of antennas. We've got other tall trees in the area, including eucalyptus trees, to provide visual integration. And as will be explained by our EME expert, we meet all of the EME health safety standards on the ground and at the street light, and can utilize commonly available mitigation measures to meet FCC occupational health safety standards for any workers on the roof. And with that, we are available to take any questions that you have.
Are there, thank you very much, Mr. Sullivan, for your presentation. So are there any, so a little bit, shall we have deliberation at this point, some discussion? Any,
Vice Chair,
Mr. Meyer?
I would definitely have questions maybe before we go into deliberation, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yes. So I thank you for the presentation, Mr. Sullivan. I guess what would be ideal in my circumstance would be enough back and forth so that we can be fully clear about the differences of understanding between the city and Verizon, because one is saying we're seeing the coverage working fine with these options, and they're saying no, that they're not seeing this piece. And so I guess commentary from the city, well, we can have that afterwards, I suppose. Mr. Sullivan, then one question would be, is there not concern about challenges with coverage going towards Vineyard, towards El Rio neighborhood, and towards River Park, where I also saw that there was coverage issues, lack of coverage in those areas as well. And I'm wondering, a 47-foot tree that has to go over the building in that direction to get to those areas would seem to be limited in that regard. Can you speak to that, please?
Sure, and I may need some help from Verizon's RF engineers who are also available, but it's my understanding from talking extensively to them that while those areas that you talked about, they're more toward kind of the north and slightly northwest of our proposed location, while we do have coverage gaps there, the coverage objective of this site is not to fill those particular gaps. The sites can only do so much. These sites typically just have 3 antenna sectors. And here, because of the capacity stress problems that we had with the Nyland and the Murado facilities, due in large part, I think, to the data traffic driven by Highway 101 and the commercial corridors on either side, the network coverage objective was to serve those areas with this facility. It is clear, you point out, that if Verizon is going to serve the other areas that you talked about, it's going to need another facility up in that area. Again, there's only so much that one site can do. They have relatively limited footprints these days. It's not like the old days where you put something up, you blast it up to full power, it covers, square miles and things like that. The facilities just can't do that anymore with respect to network integration. There are all kinds of issues of, trying to avoid signal interference between facilities. And then also the data demands that are being placed on these facilities mean that they effectively have a somewhat limited geographical footprint, and coverage in the areas that you were talking about, again, were just not part of the coverage objective for this site.
I see. And are there plans in the works for that area that's currently being underserved in terms of coverage? I know I'm a Verizon customer, and I live in River Park. I actually work at Child Development Resources, which is the building right across the street from the proposed location. So I've spent a lot of time in that very vicinity. But I also know it's peculiar that there's a Verizon store right in the collection area, and I find the coverage to be spotty around and in that region.
Right.
So what are the plans going forward to address that?
So I don't know that. Our project manager, Christine Henson, or Brianna Noller, or maybe even the RF engineers may be able to weigh in on that. I'm not aware of what the plans are in that area.
I see.
Someone from the Verizon team, can you weigh in, please? If needed, we can maybe come back to that. Certainly, we want to answer your question, and there may be some technical difficulties for. Nope, there's Christine Henson. If she can unmute, then she can answer your question.
Hi there.
Hello.
Actually, this would be a question more for the RF team to see what their coverage objective would be for that area. But I do know that we do have sites planned in the Oxnard area, which we call Oxnard Route. And we have a site in the general area. I'm not sure if it's the one that you're talking about in the El Rio area, but we do call it Rio Lindo. And we do have a planning approval there from the city. It's actually currently in BP right now. And we also have another site called Simon. That's going to be in the area that you are asking about coverage. That one's in preliminary stages right now. And we're working on trying to find a location and a landlord that would be interested in having us put a site there. So yes, we do have objectives on adding cell sites to those areas.
I see. Okay. So that's even though we look at the propagation maps and the coverage maps, and this is solving an area that you guys are looking at right now, but some of the improvements that we're seeing on those coverage maps aren't necessarily part of your objective with this site.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
And Commissioner Meyer, this is Scott Kolwitz over at the city. I just wanted to point out we have a couple of other speakers from the Verizon team that have joined the panel that might have other perspective to provide to your question. And staff wants to remind the applicant team that if you have your presentation you've given to us, as well as the presentation we gave, so if you need us to pull up any slides to help the discussion, just call on us and tell us which slides to pick up here.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Kolwitz. A question, Mr. Kolwitz, in terms of the point at which we would potentially have staff commentary on the applicant presentation, is that now or is that at a later point?
Staff is available for any questions at any point in time, but in particular, we're looking for you to engage with the applicant team at this point. So it's meant to be somewhat of a fluid conversation, but this part in particular is really aimed at the applicant. At any point that we're going through deliberations, if the Planning Commission has questions for us or the applicant team, you can ask those questions in particular while the public hearing is open. As a quick digression, I just want to let you know that we did not receive any public comments for this item. So there aren't any public members of the public that we need to call for their perspective. It's really a staff and an applicant discussion with the Planning Commission as we move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Kolwitz. One other question would be around the initial concern back in last December when this was first brought up for approval. One of the concerns was the proximity to the street light, and Mr. Sullivan, from your presentation, you seem to suggest that that's been mitigated with the proposals that have been in place. Could you explain in more detail how that's been mitigated? Because the location of this facility would be extremely close to the street light.
Right. So we have our EME expert here. It's Bill Hammett. I can see he's there. I'll let him talk in detail, but I would just like to clarify that with respect to the street light, we don't need any mitigation. Even at the top of the street light, the maximum RF energy is well within the FCC health safety standards. The mitigation would occur for some very select small parts of the corner of the rooftop in the southeast corner. And with that, I'll let Bill Hammett address.
Thank you. Vice Chair Sanchez and Commissioners, my name is Bill Hammett. I'm a registered professional engineer in the state of California. I manage a firm of 18. We're located up in the San Francisco area. And a regular part of our practice is the calculation and the measurement of radio frequency exposure conditions. It's been my principal focus for 35 years of practice. In that time, I've done more than 20,000 site evaluations, and McGraw-Hill has published my book on the topic. As engineers, our job is really straightforward. What are the exposure levels and how do they compare to the standards? I wanted to address your specific question about the street light, because it's a common misunderstanding that there's a difference in levels. If it's 77% versus 9% or some other number, those are all less than 100. This is a threshold condition. One is not at a higher risk than the other. They both are below any level at which science shows, 70 years of research, published peer-reviewed documents, standards here and abroad, all showing the same conclusion that below a certain level, there is no impact. There's no risk. It's not like a little bit of risk. It's not an additive, cumulative effect over time. This is if you're below the threshold condition, there's no impact. And the standard is set at 50 times below where that threshold is. So there's a safety margin of 50 times already built into the standard. And here, even at the location close by, at the southeast corner, the proposed location, the report that I authored that's in your attachment K gives the number 77% at the street light. So it's no more risky there than it is if you move the pole 50 feet away. The percentage number will be lower, but it's not less risk if you move it further away. There's zero risk so long as you're below the standard. And I hope that helps clarify it.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much.
Good.
This is Daisy Weekenpack. I would like to give our RF engineers, if the commissioners would allow us to, either Anthony, Cruz, or Emron to answer the questions earlier from Commissioner Meyer.
Please.
Commissioner Meyer?
Yes, I would welcome those responses.
Yes, good evening, Commissioner Meyer. This is Anthony Cruz from Verizon. Yeah, with regards to your concern about the coverage on that commercial area, yeah, this the network we're building is like a chain reaction. We have Nyland right now, which is located on that high-rise building on that area in that riverside. So as Kevin explained, it's stressing out our coverage on that Nyland side. So what we're probably experiencing on some choppy signals in that area that you're concerned about is yeah, Nyland is really stressed out. That's why we're building this Rio Lindo, the new, those sites will be offloading that site in that high-rise building. So what we are experiencing right now is a stress on that building nearby the riverside. So if we're gonna get these sites in Rio Lindo and also in Danube, we're gonna be having a better signal, as well as adding those more that Christine mentioned in Simon, which is in along. I think we're proposing something nearby that is it before the juvenile? I think a juvenile facility. That's what I remember. But we're still in the process for an additional site in that area. So that's something I wanted to add it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cruz.
Is there another speaker? Is there, or was he the speaker then? We can move to the next. Anybody else?
Yes, Vice Chair, I'd like to ask a
Commissioner
question.
Dozier, go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Vice Chair. And I'd like to thank the applicant also for a great presentation. My one question is, with your proposed project and with the conversation we just had about stress coverage, does the proposed project take into account, well, I don't know if you guys are aware of the growth plan for the city of Oxnard in this particular area. And that kind of touches back to why I keep on asking about future-proofing this project, because if the current network is already experiencing stress coverage, we have, I believe there's one more phase build out in River Park. We have Wagon Wheel, which is probably going to add 1,000 plus residential units in that same area. There's going to be another strip mall shopping center across from the collection that's going to add. There's two hotels that we're adding also along the freeway. Those are the things that I can think of right now. So once all that stuff comes online, and we already have spotty coverage, if we don't future-proof this, we're going to be back, or a future commission will be back once again approving either a height or some other alternative to this. So my question to the applicant is, what you're proposing, will that cover, I don't, like I say, I don't know if you're aware of all of the cities build out, but at least at a minimum, if an additional 1,000 housing units are developed within this area, will your proposal be able to handle that much additional capacity?
So I'll let the RF engineers provide additional information, but just based on general discussions that I've had with them on this general topic, I think that what you're talking about is, if there is a significant increase in density or uses in the city, I don't think that this site alone is going to be able to, potentially cover those. All of Verizon sites, including the proposed Danube site, have kind of a limited geographic footprint and only so much capacity that they can handle. That's why we're having to, offload the capacity stresses for Nyland and Murado. And while I could be wrong, there may be technological, advancements in the work. I think that what you're suggesting, Commissioner Dozier, is, at certain select locations, Verizon may need to install an additional site. But I'll let the RF engineers tell me if that's accurate or not.
Okay.
Yeah, hi, this is Imran Ilyas. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we hear you fine. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, and I'm a radio frequency engineer. Anthony is also helping me. We both work in this area. And just for clarification, I think if you guys are asking about the future project that both Christine and Anthony mentioned, in reality, as Kevin said, that Nyland may not be able to cover that, all the capacity need, but as far as future projects, that's something Verizon is just proposing, and they are not in any phase that we can discuss right now, that because we don't know how we are going to approach on these. So we do have plans, and we would like to discuss this as they come along, but for right now, they go as they come, and these are like kind of Verizon proprietary information that we don't know at this point. So yes, we do need some sites to cover that area, but how many and what, we probably need to come later on that one. For right now, I think all we need is that the Danube site will cover that area and it meet our coverage objective. I believe I answered that question. If it's something that you guys need more information, I can answer that. Does it answer your question?
You touch on it, but I honestly don't think you could answer it in its totally because like I said, I don't know, if you guys are aware of the build out plan for the city in this particular area. I guess I could throw that back to staff and ask, do we have plans for additional tower or antenna to be placed more centrally located in the wagon wheel and the new hotels in that area, or is everything just going to rely on the current build out of network that we have?
And Commissioner Dozier, this is Scott Kolwitz. My quick reply is we don't have any active applications in for any additional facilities from Verizon in particular. However, this is a very fluid environment. There's new proposals coming in all the time for both macro towers like this, as well as small cell antennas that we see going on public utility poles, and then other stealth facilities that we see similar to what the applicant originally proposed on this individual building. It's ever evolving. There's wireless antennas that are constantly being swapped out as new technology is available. And as the industry sees a need for additional facilities, that's when site acquisition begins on their side and they come in and propose things to us. As has already been shared in this meeting, the city, we're not opposed to wireless. We're actively approving them everywhere. And we anticipate that's going to continue happening. Most of the time, we see eye to eye with the industry providers and are able to get into a place where we're coming and recommending the same project. This is the oddball out that city staff and the applicant team are just at a slightly different perspective.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. All right. Thank you, staff, and thank you, applicant, again for the presentation. Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair. I'm finished.
Commissioner Dozier, this is Christine.
Yes.
I'd like to respond to your questions about the new development within the city.
Okay.
Currently, I can tell you that I have about 16 projects that I'm working in the city of Oxnard. I already have about 4 that are already BP approved and in construction. One of the hotels is the Mandalay Bay Hotel, which is pretty much construction complete, and that site should be in service shortly. We are working with...
That's all the way on the other side of Oxnard.
Okay. Well, we are working with one of the developers of the new hotels. He actually reached out to us and asked us if we would be interested in developing a site on the rooftop when the new hotel is built. So we are in fact talking to him now. It's very preliminary, obviously, but yes, we're not aware of the full development that the city is doing, but yes, we are working with one of the hotel developers.
And this is also Daisy Wikimpang. I'm with Verizon as well. Just want to add that, our team, to the city staff's point, our team has been working with the city on a master license agreement that's going to be presented soon for small cells. And that's another wireless solution that will eventually come into play into the city. That is the goal. But that's something future. And our RF teams, what they do is they do monitor growth in the area. We do constant drive tests, as well as our tools usually predict future usage. And so what we're doing right now is, as staff mentioned, we have the project Rio Lindo that was just approved recently, and the sites that are in construction. So collectively, between all those sites and Danube, as well as the future perhaps on small cells, that should help alleviate any concerns with regards to coverage and capacity in Oxnard. It's just that we don't have the very specifics of it, and it's not something that we generally go into specifics for until we have the projects in hand ready to submit to the city. So, and also it's very fluid, as Mr. Kolwitz mentioned. The network changes as the city grows and evolves. Our network will evolve with it. So that we can assure you that we will work with the city with regards to future development and where our network needs to go.
Okay, great. Thank you, staff, and thank you, applicant, for the additional information. But yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we are also, taking into account future growth and even, the way the workforce has changed. A lot of people are teleworking now, so it's a whole lot more demand for this particular service throughout the city. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to the presentation and also speakers. So are there any other planning commissioners that would like to speak or ask questions? If not, Mr. Kolowitz?
Commissioner Chavez is raising his hand, then I'll go next.
Oh, okay. Go ahead. So Commissioner Chavez first.
Okay. Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Fearing, for that. Thank you to the applicant for the presentation. Just a few questions. And I don't know if staff can bring up the applicant's presentation and go towards the slide where they're showing the map coverage, please.
Commissioner Chavez, we're in the process of bringing that up, and we'll scroll through the various slides and just let us know when to stop.
I appreciate that. Thank you, staff. Okay, right there. So it was mentioned that the Danube Tower was supposed to be filling in a gap between the Nyland and the Morado. The Nyland, how tall is that structure?
That's about 90 feet, sir.
19 feet?
90.
90, okay.
Yeah, it's
and
on
the Morado?
Morado, if I'm not mistaken, only like 45, because those are just like the average heights that are being approved in the city.
Okay, so 90 is for the Nyland and 45 is for the Morado. The proposed request is up to an approval of 69 that can go up to 77 feet. But the original proposed by the applicant was for a 47 that was going to be on the south side of the building, correct?
Southeast corner, yes, at 47 feet top of facility.
Okay.
And Commissioner Chavez, if I could jump in here too, we agree with the applicant that their proposed is 47 feet. Ours was 57 feet up to 69, not quite the full 77.
Thank you for the clarification. I guess ultimately what I'm trying to figure it out is that, and Mr. Sullivan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, if maybe I misunderstood you, was that the staff's recommendation to have the structure behind the building at a higher height would not be acceptable for coverage?
Yeah. As we showed in the slides and I explained, and the RF engineers can provide any additional information, if we go to the city preferred location, 50 feet north of where Verizon proposes to be, for us to achieve the same coverage footprint and capacity relief as we would get at Verizon's proposed location, we would need to be 77 feet top of facility or a 70-foot middle of antennas at the city preferred location. And that's because we're having to shoot across almost 120 feet of roof for that one sector to be shooting out to the southwest to provide coverage on 101 and the commercial corridors on both sides, and also the capacity relief that we discussed.
And if staff could jump in here really quick, we agree with Kevin Sullivan, sorry about that, that to reach 100% of their objectives, they would need to go to such a height. as we described with our presentation, we see all of our wireless projects as needing to balance a three-legged stool of coverage capacity, health, and aesthetics. And as we work with our applicant teams and commissions, there's a trade-off essentially as we get into some locations opposed to others. So staff's perspective recognizes that it would not be 100% capacity or 100% meeting objectives of Verizon, but we would be meeting some of their coverage capacity concerns, but also looking at safety and aesthetic criteria and perspective.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Kolowitz. And thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Is Verizon, Mr. Sullivan, still wanting to be in that southeast corner?
Yes, that's our preferred location. That's where we would like to be. And so, yes, that's where we want to be.
What is the applicant's position on staff's recommendation to be behind the building and an approval up to 69 in height?
Yeah, so the baseline approval is at 57 feet. And while I haven't done the math, if we were to be at 57 feet, which is all we'd be guaranteed under the staff proposed recommendation, we're going to be losing a significant percentage of our coverage objective and capacity relief objective for that one sector that's shooting off over the roof. Again, I haven't done the math, but my guess would be, probably somewhere in the 50% range, which then calls into question the feasibility of the facility. Why are we going to do that if we're not going to be getting, if we're not going to be meeting coverage objectives?
Now, one of the concerns that were brought up when this project was first brought back to us at the end of last year was the positioning of the, I don't even know what they're calling it, the discs, the satellites, the things that branch out from the actual structure, was about the positioning next to the building. And it's a three disc, correct?
But I don't know if I'm understanding your question. Maybe someone else on the team does. We do have Bill Desmond from Delta Group Engineering here. If this is an engineering question, I think he'd be able to handle that.
And Commissioner Chavez, if I can give an assist, I think you're talking about the antenna panels, and I think in the lexicon of the industry, they would talk about a 3-panel array is what you're speaking about. Part of the conversation did have to do with the antennas early on. There's also a conversation that had to do physically with the branches, the screening mechanisms, and how would that work relative to the existing building. So as an assist, I'm not sure if you're trying to go down the antenna question or if you're trying to go down the aesthetic branch route.
Both of them, actually, Mr. Kolowitz. So you get me. Thank you. Mr. Sullivan, you have someone on your team that can answer those two?
Yes, I think you're talking about proximity of both the branches and the antenna arrays to the building. And I'll let Bill Desmond of Delta Group Engineering address that.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Kevin. Bill Desmond, Delta Group's Engineering. We are the architects and engineers for the project. I've been responsible for the design of over 18,000 wireless facilities in 33 states over the last 29 years. For this facility in the southeast corner of the building, the antenna arrays are set to azimuths that I believe Kevin addressed in one of the exhibits there, that avoids shooting over the roof of the building. The azimuths are to the northeast, to the southeast, and to the southwest at that vantage point at the southeast corner. So the sectors do miss the building. With regard to the limbs of the faux eucalyptus tree, essentially where we are up against the building, we would effectively have limb lengths that are such that they do not come in contact with the building. Of course, it's like trimming a live tree when you're having a live tree growing up against a building. So the tree will hug the building until the point where we get above the parapet height, and then it would be a full canopy. But to a passerby, they're going to see a tree, and where the building sits, they won't really notice that the limbs have been trimmed, if you will, to stop at the face of the wall. So that is part of the design consideration at the southeast corner of the building. Similar situation is true at the staff recommended location to the north, where we do have to trim the lower branches, which are facing the direction of the building. So you have a similar condition, whether we're in the Verizon proposed location or the staff recommended location. One other item that I would bring up, and again, I'm not an RF engineer, but I know my way around cell sites, is the fact that this rooftop is a metal roof. It's a corrugated metal roof. And when we move to the staff recommended location, what that would do to us at the staff recommended heights is generate what's known as passive intermodulation, or what we refer to as PIM in the wireless industry. And PIM is the equivalent of a four-letter word to wireless, because if you are broadcasting antennas towards a metal surface, you're going to get feedback to the antennas, and you're going to get significant signal distortion, such that the quality of the signal that's propagated over that passive intermodulation area is degraded significantly. So part of the reason why Verizon is seeking additional height, if we are forced to move to the staff recommended location, that extra 8 feet in height versus what staff is recommending in that location versus what Verizon says we need, is taking into consideration the condition at that roof and the fact that we do have a metal roof that's corrugated, and the undulations of that corrugation are going to create significant PIM distortion in our signal. One other thing with regard to the roof, because I know the concerns about worker safety on the rooftop, and I think Kevin addressed this, that we have antennas on rooftops all the time, and we designate RF safety zones where we have an area where we need to have mitigation measures to advise people if they're entering into close proximity to an EME hazard zone. With regard to this roof, number one, I've been on this roof. It is light gauge sheet metal. It's not really suitable for walking upon. And in fact, if you don't step in the right places, you're going to actually dent the roof. So this is not a roof that has high traffic. Not only that, the roof access hatch that exists on this building does not even have a fixed access ladder. So I don't anticipate that we have a significant concern about public exposure from a safety perspective of people on this rooftop. So that's something that is worth noting. Lastly, with the added height that Verizon indicates they would need if we were to be directed to move to the staff recommended location, the higher we go, the less EME hazards we have. So actually, unless the staff recommended height could achieve thresholds for EME safety at those lower center lines that staff is recommending, we're actually enhancing the margin of safety with a higher center line. So if we are asked to move to the north, I definitely, from my experience, could state unequivocally, we would need that added height, and it would make sense to have that added height. However, we're perfectly happy in the Verizon proposed location. And I think that realistically, given the site conditions and the objectives for the site, it is the best location overall.
Let me ask you, since you've been to the site, you walked the roof, you know that it's pretty much a roof that's not meant to be used for high traffic. If the structure is to be behind, based off of where the staff is recommending, what, if any, health risks does the metal roof contribute, again, if any, in cooperation with the tower?
I'm not aware of any enhanced EME due to the surface being one material versus another. I would defer to Bill Hammett on that, though. That's our subject matter expert when it comes to EME safety, and so I'll turn that question over to Bill Hammett.
Trying to log back in here. Yes, thank you, Commissioner Chavez. I understand the question is if there's any multiplying effect or from that roof surface. And the answer is no, not really. Most surfaces are reflective in some way. Whether it's if it's a solid surface, the energy does not like to go through it, and it will bounce back in some manner. Maybe a little better from a corrugated roof, but the corrugations, as Mr. Desmond said, are undulating. It's not a smooth surface. So physically, I think it's going to have a limited impact. We assume, for the purposes of our calculations, that it has a 1.6 times reflection factor, which we know to be conservative from thousands of measurements. And so we anticipated that possibility, but our calculations are still conservative.
Mr. Hammett, let me ask you, if it was to go to where Verizon is requesting to be placed at, how much foliage would need to be on that structure to not be considered a threat, if that even matters?
How much foliage was your question?
Correct.
I think the foliage is not considered to be a blocking agent for energy. The foliage, the energy goes out toward the horizon, very little coming down. It goes out toward the horizon past whatever foliage is on the tree. It doesn't block the energy. To the extent that there is foliage beneath the antennas, it might block it a little, but again, we don't consider that when we do the calculations, which we want to be conservative.
Okay. Mr. Desmond, since you deal with the structure design, for security purposes, what is the way to be able to access the structure for maintenance, routine maintenances?
For a freestanding monotree structure of this nature, or any monopole structure, the maintenance access is achieved via man lift. There are no fixed ladders or other appurtenances that would allow a person to climb the structure, and that's not only for aesthetic considerations, especially when we're dealing with the faux tree, but also just for practical purposes. We don't usually have fixed climbing apparatus on these structures, because we all know what happens when you give ne'er-do-wells an opportunity to climb something. They'll find a way to climb it. So we typically start our branching on a monotree at 15 foot above finished grade. Sometimes we go higher than that, but we generally will not go lower than that, with the expectation that that's a adequate height to prevent someone from climbing and coming into an EME hazard zone.
Now, what steps are the maintenance workers for the structure taking to protect themselves while they're working on this?
I'll take a stab at that, but I'll also let Verizon weigh in if needed, if they don't like my answer. But when there is scheduled maintenance of a facility, what happens is the sector or sectors that are to be worked upon are turned down, as we call it. So basically the signal is cut off to those sectors, so that then the workers are able to work in close proximity to the antennas.
Okay. I don't know if anyone from Verizon is going to comment on it, but would it be possible that if any work is done around the building or at that light pole, communication with Verizon can be established so that it can be turned down when they need to make repairs?
This is Daisy with Verizon, Commissioner Chavez. Are you asking with regards to workers on the light pole, or you were asking on with regards to workers on the rooftop with their maintenance?
I'm asking for both because the way that I'm looking at this, that if Verizon's taking steps to turn down something for their employees to go do routine maintenance, would it be possible to work in cooperation with any type of maintenance done to the roof, any type of maintenance done to the light pole?
So as far as what is defined as routine maintenance, that's a pretty broad term, and I'm not really sure like what specific routine maintenance we would have different measures for. But if it's just something that you're questioning about coordination, our faux trees and most of our structures will usually have some sort of signage on them that would actually indicate a way to contact Verizon. So we usually have our NOC number, our Network Operations Center number, and that's a number that can be reached at any time 24/7. And so that can be contacted if there's any questions with regards to the facility. In addition to that, and I'll let Bill Hammett address this a little bit deeper, we do have very specific mitigation that I think he is recommending. And I don't think it involves powering down of the antennas, but Bill, keep me honest here.
Certainly. And the same signage that Daisy mentioned at the base of the pole would also apply on the roof. And we call for several signs on the roof. And those signs all have the contact information for Verizon. So if it's not been prearranged, but there's an emergency need up there, you can call that number. The signs also include the site identity number. So you can call that general operations center, give them the site you're on, tell them what the issue is, and they'll shut it down. It's not necessary for most of the operations. There are only very limited areas on the roof right at the corner where that might be an issue. For most of the roof, on the flat portion or even the sloped portions, as shown in the figure in attachment K, most of those are just notification areas. The only time you would shut down is if you're right actually at the corner under the antenna.
So let me narrow it down. For if a city employee had already made contact with Verizon to replace a balance or a light bulb in that street light, if it was already pre-scheduled, would Verizon shut down or turn down until the work is completed on that light pole?
Now, on the light pole, there is no requirement. Everything is below the public limit. There's no requirement for notice. There's no requirement for shutdown because the levels there are so low. It's given just the distance from the antennas to the pole and the fact that the antennas are higher. The only location would be not for city workers, but for private parties hired by the storage facility. But for city workers, there's no access restriction of any sort. This goes on all over, particularly as they're putting antennas on the light poles. And we measure these to confirm what the calculations show, which is that there's no necessity for powering down either for work on the pole itself, the attachment, for working at the light itself, the luminaire. None of those require access restrictions of any sort.
Okay, I appreciate all the answers and comments from the applicant. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you. We're at Mr. Kolwitz. Mr. Kolwitz?
Yes, Vice Chair Sanchez, I'm here for you and the rest
Okay,
of the commission.
thank you. So we're at the 2-hour mark. Should we take a 5-minute break or just go ahead and go further?
Well, it's always at the pleasure of the commission. You know, if all if all questions have been asked, then this is where the commission would typically start rolling into deliberations. This is your only item on the agenda. So we completely defer to you and the rest of the commissioners as far as how you'd like to move forward. But I will point out that Commissioner Fuhring still has some questions.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Take your
thank
time.
you. Thank you very much, Mr. Sullivan, for the presentation. So I have a number of questions. you mentioned, I'm going to use some of your terminology, the best location for site objectives. Can you remind me again? I understand that the one of the objectives is capacity. You have capacity issues. Where are those? And it's because those other towers that you have are getting some strain. There's a lot of overcapacity problems there. Is there a particular area you can pinpoint? Is it River Park? Is it some other part of Oxnard that is causing this overcapacity? Is it the highway itself? So trying to get at what is the objective of this antenna?
Well, let the RF engineers keep me honest on this. It's my understanding, though, from talking to them, that the capacity stresses, they're all due to how much data is being run through the system, and that is being significantly influenced by travelers on Highway 101, and then also the busy commercial corridors just to the north and south of that. That's where we're aiming a couple of sectors of the Danube facility to provide capacity relief for Nyland to the northwest, and then Murado almost due south.
I'm referring to, I'm looking at the packet, attachment H, which gives me like an aerial view at different heights. I can see at the city preferred location at 40 feet up to 70 feet. And so my question is, at Verizon's preferred location, it would seem that you're actually closer to that metal roof. And in the direction of River Park, you're going to have a significant amount of PIM distortion. And so isn't the antenna at Verizon's preferred location actually going to cause more problems for the folks in the River Park area?
No, for a couple of reasons. One, all three of the antenna sectors at Verizon's preferred location at the southeast corner are pointed away from the building. As we noted here, we're not trying to serve more north and northwest. That's not a coverage objective of this particular site. And I think is that where the River Park is? So that's right. We are not pointing any of our antenna sectors in that kind of slightly northwest direction toward River Park.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, so yeah, that was my concern, because it looks like you're trying to go over a metal building on the long part of the building, which is the hypotenuse of the building, which is the longest piece of metal that you've got in order to get coverage at River Park, which seemed to me from an engineering point of view, not a very good solution. But that's why I asked the question, what's your site objective? It looks like your site objective is not River Park.
That is correct. If you go to slide 11, please.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see there where the antenna sectors are aimed, and we don't have one aiming kind of north to River Park. We're not shooting any antenna sectors over the building.
Okay. When Verizon installs these towers that are by a building, do you tend to put them at corners of buildings so that you don't have to go over the roof of a building?
I think the answer, for multiple reasons that have been discussed tonight, I think is yes, but I'll feel more comfortable if a Verizon project engineer or project manager or one of the RF engineers answers that.
I can take a stab at that first, Kevin. Bill Desmond again. The short answer to your question is, if we're near a building and we're at a height that the building comes into play in terms of the propagation of the signal, that is a concern if we're facing over a rooftop, and we generally would not unless we could attain significant height such that the building doesn't cause what we call shadowing. And back to what Kevin used as an analogy with a flashlight. We actually in the industry use the term shadowing when we're talking about near field obstructions to our signal propagation, because it does have the effect that a tabletop would with a flashlight in terms of shadowing the ground below the table. So the short answer is, if we're putting a tower up against the building, which we do all the time, we avoid shooting over that building unless we can achieve significant antenna center line to where the building shadowing concern is removed from the equation.
So even though you're pointing the antennas away from the building, if somebody did get on the roof, even though it's a metal roof, and that would be rare, but if somebody did get on the roof, they would encounter some radiation from the antenna. Just because of the cone or the donut of the radiation coming off of the antennas, right?
Yes,
So that
you're right.
specific issue was studied, and I think Bill Hammett can address that.
Yes, you're exactly right. There's a tiny amount that would be available for somebody walking on the roof. Keep in mind that there's a 50 times safety factor to get to the threshold of 100% of the limit, and this is going to be tiny, 1 or 2% or less everywhere else on the roof except right at that corner. So it's not like a little bit of energy is a problem because, as I mentioned earlier, it's a threshold condition. If you're below that limit, there's no risk, no credible indication. I'm trying to quote the language from one of the standards. No credible indication of adverse effects at levels equal to the standard or below. And here you're way, way, way below.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mr. Kolowitz, I have a question for you.
Commissioner Fearing, we're here for you.
Thank you. Thank you. Of the objections to the Verizon site at that corner, how would you prioritize those? Would number 1 be safety, number 2 aesthetics, number 3 height, or how would you characterize that as to why the city would like to put it in the pretty much the middle and relocate it and make a higher antenna?
Commissioner Fearing, thank you for the question. It's twofold. It really is aesthetics, and it really is the exceedance of the FCC regulations when it comes right down to it. What the applicant team is proposing is essentially a series of mitigation measures to try to deal with the exposure levels. Staff's perspective is, if a alternative location slightly higher than what's being proposed can simply eliminate the need for those mitigation measures, is that a better route to go? In terms of the aesthetics consideration, the city's priority in terms of wireless facilities is to make them disappear when it comes right down to it. If there is a gold standard, it would be architectural enhancements to buildings with RF transparent materials, so you just simply don't see them. Where that is not an option, then we start looking at screening methodologies. And from staff's perspective, moving the macro cell from the current location that's that's very visible from the public right of way, sliding it behind the building acts as that screening mechanism. We would rather have their initial proposal. We understand that there were significant structural issues that did not allow them to make that a feasible project. So taking that off the table, staff's recommended alternative location is a preferred option, the preferred option that we have.
Were there other options as far as other buildings were concerned? Because there are taller buildings in that area, and I know the antennas would need to be pointed down more, but were there other options for other buildings looked at?
Staff's briefest response, and I think this is ultimately probably best left for Verizon to respond to, is as part of site acquisition on an applicant team, they're going to be out there looking at all sorts of different options. It's not Verizon's decision to make alone, because they are engaging with property owners who may or may not want these on their facilities. And those that are interested in having these might have a dollar amount associated with allowing Verizon to go onto their properties. So it's a negotiated settlement, if you will, if I could use those terms, to allow Verizon to get onto various properties. Essentially, what staff would call that would be the alternative sites analysis. What other locations were looked at, and where was it feasible to potentially go? Verizon, I know, engaged in that once upon a time. This was the only, per our discussions with Verizon, this was the only site in this area that they came to terms on in terms of a location. With that, let me turn it over to an appropriate representative on Verizon's team to maybe further identify, what other sites had been considered.
Verizon did take a look at least 10, I think it may have been upwards of 15 alternative sites or locations in the area for this particular facility to be placed. It did that over, a long period of time and presented an updated alternative site analysis to the city, I believe, in early August of this year. But in all of the discussions that we had with potential candidate alternative sites, we either found landlords who wouldn't engage and just ghosted us, said they weren't interested, or we couldn't reach commercially reasonable terms with them. But we did take a look at a number of alternative locations and couldn't find one suitable.
And on another line, so we either have a situation where we have an antenna that's 47 feet tall, or one that's potentially up to 70 feet tall, but hidden behind a building. What is the difference in coverage between the two? Is it going to be a capacity issue? Are you not going to be able to hit your capacity targets based on the goals that you've set? Or is it more of a coverage issue? There's going to be some holes in coverage at the city's proposed location.
Yeah, let the RF engineers, either Anthony or Emron, provide any detail that they can, but I think it would be a diminishment of both our coverage footprint and our capacity relief the lower we go in height. And if we were limited to the top end height of the facility, which is 69 feet as proposed by staff, which means you have top of antennas then at 66 feet or center of antenna 62 feet. I don't know exactly what the percentage would be, but it would be a material diminution in our coverage footprint and our capacity relief for the facility. And Anthony or Emron, can you provide any additional detail on that?
Yeah, this is Anthony Cruiser, Mr. Commissioner. Yeah, I agree with Kevin. It's both. If you decrease your coverage, your target capacity will also go down. And secondly, we have like certain objectives to cover, like as Kevin mentioned, it's the 101 freeway. It was also discussed a while ago about specific areas that we need to relieve some capacity issues, but there's with mobile we have the criteria regarding mobility, so it's really also a factor. That's why 101 is one thing that we are one of our objective. And also I can also add that part of Verizon's commitment, we benchmark I think twice a year this area and this highway. That's why we have also this kind of projects to improve certain areas in Oxnard. It's part of our route, what we call a route drive.
Yep.
So yeah, so that's one reason why we are like in this area, in this specific location, to cover certain objectives.
Mm-hmm. If you were to be at the city's proposed location, what height would the tree need to be in order to achieve your site objectives?
It will be the, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, as we discussed earlier, it would be 77 feet top of facility or 74 feet top of antenna. That's what will replicate, substantially replicate the coverage footprint that we would receive with a 47-foot tall facility at the southeast corner.
Okay. And I think I heard Commissioner Chavez's set of questions. One of the other antennas is 90 feet.
Yeah, I think the RF engineer said that the Nyland antenna off to the northwest is 90 feet tall.
Okay.
Yeah, that's an existing site, sir.
Okay.
Actually on the National University building.
Okay. So we could have the best of both worlds if we had a 77-foot tall tree, is what you're saying. You would be able to get your objectives met, and the city would be able to get its objectives met.
Verizon would be able to meet its objectives for coverage and capacity relief at 77 feet, yes.
Okay.
And Commissioner Fearing, from staff's perspective, while we recognize that at 77 feet, Verizon would hit 100% of its objectives in terms of coverage, the question that staff would pose to the commission is, from an aesthetics perspective, is that something that the Planning Commission feels is in the best interest of the community at that height? That is something for the Planning Commission to deliberate. On the flip side, if something lower than that was needed, the term that Kevin Sullivan has used was, there's a diminution of objective coverage as you go lower in height. And staff would be interested in knowing what percentages are we looking at as we drop lower? What's the actual diminution as we drop in height? Understanding that that is a fluid number.
Right. I mean, I'm referring to the maps that I see in attachment H, and I would think a higher tree would actually be of benefit to the River Park area as well. I've been there. I'm a Verizon customer too, and I've had drop calls in the River Park area when I'm there. So I'm trying to find a solution to have the best of both worlds. We meet our requirements for aesthetics. Verizon meets its requirements for basically the site objectives that they have for the 101 corridor, but we also get better coverage elsewhere. Anyway, that's all the questions I have.
Any final questions from planning commissioners for staff or the Verizon?
Yes, Vice Chair Sanchez, if I may.
Yes.
There was the consideration of co-location that was raised by staff, and is that an area of interest, and is that something that is more or less possible with the two options that Verizon is wanting, or is that not a concern for Verizon?
I'm going to let Bill Desmond discuss this. Right now, Verizon, to my knowledge, doesn't have, no other carrier has come and expressed interest to co-locate on this facility. There would be a lot of factors that would go into that. I think the carriers generally welcome co-location between each other, but every network has their own objectives, and whether any other carrier would be able to meet their objectives, co-locating on this facility, is just speculation at this point. But if there are technical questions about the height of a facility being more amenable to co-location or not, I would leave that to Bill Desmond.
And to answer that question, if we're talking about the staff recommended location and a height of 69 feet overall versus a height of 77 feet overall, the facility would be more co-location friendly at the added height because of the aforementioned separation requirement vertically between carriers' antennas to avoid interference between the various carrier frequencies. So the added height at the staff recommended location would enhance the co-locatability of that location. At the 47-foot center line, if the other carriers had similar azimuth objectives or coverage objectives, they could co-locate below us, but in practical terms, they probably would be less inclined to do so, just because if the antennas get too low, then again, they have the same issue of how much area that particular site is able to cover. But both of these scenarios could be made to be co-locatable, and it's simply a matter of engineering the structure to have the structural capacity to support that co-location. One other consideration that was brought up by staff earlier is the 6409 provisions for co-location on eligible facilities. And that does entitle a carrier that wanted to come along to this existing facility to actually increase the height of the facility. But for a monotree structure, that essentially requires what we call a drop and swap. They would have to take this structure down and replace it with a new taller structure. And that can become cost prohibitive for future carriers to wish to co-locate if it's not a structure they could just readily add antennas to. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword in terms of the co-location question.
Sorry, you're muted, Commissioner Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. So what I'm getting is that it's not a priority at this time for Verizon to make the site particularly co-locatable, given the objectives. It's not one of your priorities or a key priority.
I guess stated a different way is we have no objection to co-location. We just haven't, no one has told us they're interested in it.
Okay. Thank you.
Vice Chair Sanchez,
Yes, go ahead.
If it's possible that we can just move into deliberation if my fellow commissioners have no further questions, comments, or concerns.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. Anybody, if not, we go into deliberation. Do you want to go ahead and go first, Commissioner Chavez?
All right, thank you, Vice Chair. And thank you to the applicant and his team, and thank you to staff for the presentation. This has been something that has been dragged on for a long time. We saw it come before us last year, and one of the concerns was that weeks before a holiday, staff came and said, hey, we need you to move it behind the building. And then I had a real problem with that, especially when it was just a couple of weeks before the actual planning commission meeting. We heard from Mr. Hammett that there are steps to be taken to mediate the concerns for safety for working on the roof or on the light poles. And then we also heard staffs, and I guess it's kind of one of those tug of wars of trying to figure out who do we believe on that matter. And we also saw the images from staff reports as well as from the applicant's report as far as coverage goes. Again, to me, this is a real difficult one, but at the same time, the options that I'm seeing is that if we go with what Verizon is saying to be placed at the southeast corner, then they're happy. They're able to. It's only 47 in height. If we go with staff's recommendation, we are saying that it is a maximum height of 57, but depending on the planning manager, it can go up to 69 feet. And it's out of the view of the public. But Verizon has already expressed that, they need to go up a little bit higher than that. So, and I'm not making the motion, I'm just saying that if I had to make the decision of saying, let's put it behind the building, but put that the maximum height be 69 feet and to not exceed 80, I think kind of puts them right in that green zone of being able to still deliver service, is out of the view. I'm not saying aesthetics, it doesn't matter, because it does, but at the same time, this area, it's kind of industrial business area. It's not a residential area, even though there are condos to the side of it. So the way that I'm looking at it, and I look to my commissioners for their comments also, is that if we approve where Verizon's at, then everyone's happy. But if we put it in the back and then we exceed what staff is recommending as far as height goes, we do, going back to Commissioner Meyer, we give them that opportunity to have others join in and be a on the structure. Again, that's not a motion, that's just me thinking out loud and trying to make sense of it. But those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to go next? Raise your hand.
Yep.
Okay, Commissioner Furigan.
I'm totally in agreement with Commissioner Chavez on that. And again, I'd like to thank staff and Verizon for the presentation. I think it is the best solution for both parties, for the city of Oxnard and for Verizon, to do just what Commissioner Chavez recommended. So I would agree with that.
Any other thoughts? Commissioner Meyer?
Yeah, I guess I'd like a little more clarification, perhaps, in my understandings and with staff and possibly with the applicant. But in terms of like the three-legged concerns around health, the capacity challenge, and then the visual. The location, the original location of the applicant, if I'm understanding correctly, the health safety concerns are mitigated to a reasonable regard of any concern, and the propagation, the capacity desired is met. Is it really come down more to the aesthetics? That is what might be the greatest concern for staff with the tree at the applicant's proposed location?
Commissioner Meyer, if that's a question to staff, at the applicant's preferred location at the southeast corner of the building, there is a exceedance of the FCC regulations at that corner at their proposed height. So that's one of the items that we're trying to move from. It's not on the light pole, it is on the rooftop. So part of our recommendation to go higher was for the FCC's thresholds not to even become an issue on the rooftop itself. So at the southeast corner, though, we saw that there were two issues. One was FCC regulations, the other one was aesthetics. And aesthetics is very subjective. So that's why we're looking at the Planning Commission as a whole to help with that discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Kolwitz. I guess that confuses me in regard to what Mr. Hammett was sharing around safety. Is it that what Verizon's proposing for mitigations to that southeast corner, I think if I'm thinking right, are concerning or inadequate to get past the threshold? Or what's the problem, the challenge with the safety side of it here?
So if I could, the applicant team does have some self-imposed conditions, if you will, that they're trying to address those concerns. Those conditions, the self-imposed conditions that they're speaking of, are essentially related to human behavior and other things over time. Staff is essentially worried about a failure of that over the longevity of the project. So rather than have those, rather than set up someone for failure, our recommendation would be to go higher with the particular pole. So it's just taken out of the equation altogether.
I see.
And if you want me to, I can read the self-imposed conditions of what they had proposed. In the current version of the resolution, they are not included, because if we went with the staff recommendation, the location as well as the higher height, those are not needed anymore. But as I flip to attachment K, give me just 1 second here. So in the applicant's report, it says it is recommended that the roof access hatch of the public storage building be kept locked so that the Verizon antennas cannot be approached by unauthorized persons. To prevent occupational exposures in excess of the FCC guidelines, it's recommended that appropriate RF safety training, to include review of the information in a figure, review of personal monitor use, and review of the lockout tagout procedures, be provided to all authorized personnel who have access to the roof or to the antennas, including employees and contractors of Verizon and of the property. No access in a yellow shaded area or within 21 feet directly in front of the antennas themselves, such as might occur during certain maintenance activities, should be allowed while the base station is in operation, unless other measures can be demonstrated to ensure that occupational protection requirements are met. It is recommended that the boundary lines be marked on the roof with blue and yellow paint to identify the areas with which exposure levels are calculated to exceed the FCC public and occupational limits, respectively, as shown in the figure. It is recommended that explanatory signage or signs be posted at the roof access hatch, on the roof, at the boundary lines, and on the pole or below antennas, readily visible from any angle of approach to persons who might need work within that distance. So staff, we essentially see a series of failures that could occur, a failure of annual training, a failure of signage, a failure of paint to be kept up during the duration of the life of the building. So again, from staff's perspective, we think a better solution is to go higher rather than to set someone up for failure.
Thank you, Mr. Kolowitz.
You have any other comments or questions, Commissioner Ryan?
It's just kind of a vexing situation. There's not a clear-cut, clean answer. And I do know from working in that area for many, many years and walking through that area for years and years, that there are several tall trees, I'm guessing, in the near vicinity, but not directly around that building, but within 100 to 200 feet that are 60, 70 feet tall. So I'm thinking in a broad way, maybe the 77-foot height behind the building wouldn't be too concerning, especially consider that it's towards the very little used parking lot section of the area, behind the commercial shopping facility, Vallarta, and other buildings right there. Yeah, so if the concern around safety primarily is one that is felt to be not reasonably mitigated at the applicant's location, then I would lean towards honoring the applicant's desire for the 77-foot height in the city's preferred location at this point.
Commissioner Meyer, this is Scott Colbitz again from the city. I just wanted to point out too, in the resolution that we have prepared, there is a condition that we include for additional trees to be proposed or to be installed. So it's condition 26, and I won't read the whole thing, but it effectively looks for one or two 24-inch box tree, one or two 24-inch box size eucalyptus-like trees, such as a Brisbane box, to be planted near the faux eucalyptus tree. So the thought is you'd have the one faux tree and then you'd have two similar live trees planted in the back area. As part of that condition, we would work with our on-contract landscape architect to make sure that the location of it works relative to other considerations of the building. So I just wanted to share that with you as well, that that's already baked into the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Colwitz. And that does remind me that there was a concern from the applicant side about that aspect of the proposal.
Correct.
That I guess the cost and irrigation challenges or costs associated with those additional trees was not an agreeable provision. So if we are in the mode of looking at the 77-foot option in the behind, I guess I'd want to hear from the applicant about, with the proposed additional eucalyptus box trees, where the applicant stands on that.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Meyer. I'd like Bill Desmond to address this issue and just identify whether there are any, material prohibitive conditions that we're aware of on the ground that, might prevent this. I know that this would be some issue that we would have to go back to the landlord on, but are we aware that there would be a major problem, Bill, with installing, a couple of box trees proximate to the proposed alternative location?
No, I don't see any issues with that at all. There are existing trees that are in the vicinity of where the equipment and the staff's recommended location are sited. So it would really be a trade out of the potentially impacted trees that would be removed and then replaced. But because of the trees that are already there, we would likely be replacing additional trees. But beyond that, no issues whatsoever in terms of placing live Brisbane box or similar eucalyptus species in the vicinity of the proposed mono tree.
Thank you, Mr. Desmond. No further questions at this time.
Thank you. Commissioner Dozier, do you have anything, any questions or anything to say at this point?
Yeah, I wanted to thank staff and the applicant for the presentations. Even though this is seems like it should be straightforward, that there are so many things that we do have to consider, and my fellow commissioners seem to have touched on, all the concerns that I have too. I keep coming back to what staff has said as far as their objective, and that would be probably for all projects, not necessarily this one, but in this case, they talked about safety, coverage, and aesthetics. It seems to me, in my opinion, that the applicant has addressed two of those concerns for a city, but there's still an open question as far as whether or not they satisfy city's concerns for safety for the FCC health issues. And seeing that the staff in this uh, situation is the steward of the ensuring that the city, is safe. I would tend to side with Commissioner Chavez and others that are that have expressed that they're more in agreements with staff's recommendation of placing the antenna on top of the facility and adjusting the height as required. So those are my opinions. Thank you, Vice Chair. And once again, thank you, staff, and thank you, applicant, for the excellent presentations.
Yes, thank you for everybody who made a presentation. So at this point, are we ready to move further, or anything else that we need to discuss?
Vice Chair Sanchez.
Yes.
Just for a question to Mr. Sullivan. Mr. Sullivan, that if an motion was to be made tonight, what would be the ideal in order to ensure that Verizon meets its obligations height if we were to request that the structure be placed behind the building? What is the minimum height that you guys would be able to still be able to meet your obligations?
The 77-foot top of facility. So the top of antennas are probably going to be 3 feet below that. And that's what our RF engineers have determined would replicate the same coverage footprint and capacity relief that we would get with the 47-foot facility at the southeast corner. We'd be able to be up high enough to avoid all of those interference issues with the roof and meet our objectives.
Thank you. Vice Chair, if there are no further comments from my fellow commissioners, I will go ahead and make a motion.
Okay. And second? I'll second it.
We need the motion first?
Yeah, first, yeah.
Yeah, I was just checking to make sure that nobody else had any questions or comments or concerns before I actually made the motion.
Go ahead.
All right, seeing that there's none, I'll make the motion, and staff can correct me, but I believe we have to continue this item because of the resolution is not the motion, but the motion being that the structure be placed behind the building at a minimum height of 77 feet.
Commissioner Chavez, 2 quick notes. We don't feel that we need to continue this to another hearing date. There simply could be a motion that the commission makes to staff to revise the existing resolution, which is already to approve it. Essentially, what we think the language would be based on what we're hearing is that the Planning Commission approve an alternative version of the project located 50 feet northerly of the proposed location with a maximum height of a 77-foot top of facility or something there. I jumbled that up a little bit, but a maximum height of 77 feet to the top of facility, finding the project to be categorically exempt from environmental review and approve resolution subject to certain findings and conditions. I think there would be an edit to condition number 24, which talked about the modulation of height. We would essentially eliminate that portion that talks about the modulation of height, and potentially an edit to condition 25, which talks about the FCC studies. Essentially, if we're going up to that level of height, then it doesn't appear that that would be a necessary condition at that point.
So we are removing conditions 24 and 25, or are we editing them?
Condition 25, I believe, is to be removed. I'm trying to do the quick read of this while I speak. 24. we would keep the portion that talks about changing the location of the wireless facility. So essentially the first sentence would remain. And the rest of the condition language looks like that would be struck. So 24 would simply say, in order to be less prominently visible from the Financial Square right-of-way, the proposed wireless communications facility shall be located on the eastern side of the existing building in a location that is approximately no less than 50 feet northerly of the proposed location at the southeastern corner of the building. And we would remove all of that. Yeah, we could retain the portion that says the location shall be reviewed and approved by the planning manager. That portion could be retained prior to the applicants submitting construction plans to Building and Engineering Division for plan check. So that would be the full language of condition 24. And then condition 25 is the portion that talks about, in order to be compliant with the maximum FCC general public and occupational exposure limits. That one, I think, can be eliminated altogether from the resolution.
Okay. So edit to 24, removal of 25. And then, so we're just revising, we're not actually having to continue. So revision that the maximum height be 77, removal, edit to condition 24, removal of condition 25.
That is what I am hearing. And Commissioner Chavez, since we do have the applicant still on the phone with us, it would be appropriate to also ask them if that's condition language that they are able to live with.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yeah, I'll have any Verizon representatives correct me if I'm wrong, but what is being recommended with respect to the motion and the edits to the resolution are acceptable to Verizon.
Okay. Seeing that nobody's turning off their mics from the Verizon team.
Just want to confirm, Commissioner Chavez, we're talking of a maximum height of 77 feet tall, and that we will, the part about the exact location and height shall be reviewed and approved by planning manager will be removed, since we're talking about a fixed height of 77. Is that my understanding?
That is the initial. Mr. Kolowitz, can you clarify?
We are talking about a height of 77 feet. We still are looking for the Verizon team to work with the planning team to find out the exact location. The reason why we're looking for that nuance to be included in that is the applicant team has talked to us previously about needing to confirm the location relative to structure of the building, any other utilities and such things that are in the ground. So it gives us a level of flexibility as they effectively prepare their structural drawings. The intent is 50 feet north, give or take, as determined by their structural engineers.
As far as Verizon is concerned, we are comfortable with the location 50 feet north, provided the maximum height is at 77.
Okay.
So Commissioner Chavez, if we can make sure that you strike the term height from the approval by planning manager, that sounds like that would cover that concern.
And that is the edit that we have made. So the location shall be reviewed and approved by the planning manager prior to the applicant submitting construction plans to Building and Engineering Division for plan check, is the way that second sentence would read.
Are you okay with that, Daisy?
Yes, if we remove that final sentence that states the exact location and height shall be reviewed and approved by planning manager, we would agree to the 77-foot height maximum at the location approximately no less than 50 feet northerly.
Is that okay, Mr. Kolowitz?
If that's the direction that Verizon would like to move, then in that situation, we would look at coming back to the Planning Commission at a future meeting because we need the PC to identify the exact location. What we're trying to work with here is to help facilitate a process. The PC is clearly giving us intent of what you would like to achieve. As staff, our job is to facilitate your intent. And this gives us the ability to work with the applicant team to achieve that intent. But as of today, we do not have a site plan that says this is the exact location that works for Verizon, but we understand what the intent is, and we can achieve that with the applicant team.
So, Mr. Kolowitz, I'll, if it's okay with staff and Verizon, I'll do my initial impulse was to continue the item to a future date until we have the exact location where it fits well for Verizon, fits well for the city that has a height of maximum height of 77. Is that appropriate?
That is an option that the Planning Commission has. From staff's perspective, we think that we are so close to the end zone here that we would look for a trust exercise with one another here that we can get over this collectively. It seems like this is something that we can clearly achieve.
Commissioner, if you may indulge Verizon, we would prefer not to have a continuance. However, we do believe that the location has been addressed as far as the site plans that we submitted when we were doing our alternative analysis to the city, which is why that particular part of the condition, we submitted to the city 2 different plans. We submitted alternative plans for the location. We submitted the original plans for the location that we proposed in the southeast corner, but we also submitted site plans for the alternate location at 77 feet. So both of those have been submitted to the record to the city. And that is actually already been predetermined, which is why I was asking for the removal of that additional sentence. And also, I'm also asking for the indulgence of the commissioners not to have a continuance. As everyone has mentioned, we've been back and forth with this for a long time, but we did provide site plans. And Bill Desmond, you drew up the site plans. Please confirm that that was something that you had drawn up, and I can confirm, and Kevin can confirm that this was submitted to the city.
I think we have staff looking for what you were speaking of, so we'll just give staff a minute or two as they look through their reports. So yeah.
And just to confirm, yes, we did submit 2 alternative design locations and designs, the second one being at the staff recommended location and at the Verizon requested height, 50 feet to the north of the original location. So we do have a plan showing where we believe we should be placing it at the staff recommended location. And I think we're in substantial conformance with the intent of staff. If we're talking about moving it, we're talking about moving it, one way or another, possibly a foot or 2. I don't know that that's worth holding up passing of a resolution.
This is Scott Kolbitz chiming in here again. Attachment I of your packet is the reduced plans for a staff recommended project, which does have a site plan showing the general location where they're proposing it. That would become the exhibit that we're basically looking at as we move forward. I still would recommend that we include language that allows that location to change ever so slightly. It's really for the benefit of the applicant when it comes right down to it. Our charge is to follow the direction that the Planning Commission is giving. So the Planning Commission is clearly saying 77 feet tall at this location, give or take slightly per engineered standards, as Mr. Desmond just stated to you. It is supposed to, the way that I would characterize that condition is is effectively to the benefit of the applicant team.
And I would agree, just in my experience, that that's just generally a CYA note, for lack of a better term, that does benefit both parties. And I don't have a problem with that. That would be my recommendation, to accept that, but I'll let Daisy weigh in.
What I would like to express is that we do have several steps beyond this approval, right? We go back to building plan check. There's checks and balances there to make sure that safety is followed, that the site plan is followed as approved by the commission. So I do still have a concern that, you know, if we add another layer of check here, that it might be redundant and unnecessary at this point if the concern is health and safety, because we are going to plan check for further checks. And we have already engineered this location the way that the city would like to see it, exactly the way that the commissioners wish, which is 77 feet and 50 feet north. So yeah, if I may, Commissioner, I would like to state as Verizon that for the sake of project moving forward, you know, we would like to still request that that condition not be there for that reason. But of course, it is at your indulgence.
My fellow commissioners, if I could chime in just a minute, what we're attempting to do tonight is provide a recommendation to City Council. And if there is something within our recommendation tonight that Verizon doesn't feel comfortable with, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, they'll have the opportunity to bring that up to City Council once, if this recommendation goes forward.
Commissioner Dozier, the Planning Commission is the final the final approval authority on this unless it's appealed.
Okay.
So this really is final level of review and approval. The ability for Verizon to modify their plan slightly after it leaves the Planning Commission, if the Planning Commission would approve this without the language that staff is proposing, if they have to modify their plans in some way that, you know, it has to move, you know, 5 or more feet because of something that we're unaware of right now, we're setting ourselves up potentially for a need to come back to the Planning Commission. We as staff would implore Verizon not to go down that path. And if they would accept a condition where staff would be working with them prior to going into Planning Commission, or prior to going to plan check, we could help facilitate that process and not require another public hearing for their project, which allows them to get 2 steps closer, if you will, to actual implementation of their project. It's not adding another level of review, I would also say, because planning staff still needs to review any project that leaves this body and attempts to go into building and engineering. We still do a review to see if it's consistent with your approval.
Commissioners, just in the interest of you know, being collaborative with the city, we will go ahead and agree to leave the condition. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, staff. Thank you, applicant.
Mr. Kolowitz, if you can, please read the recommendation, and then that would be my motion for that, Mr. Vice Chair.
Commissioner Chavez, gladly. So the motion will read that the Planning Commission approve an alternative version of the project located 50 feet northerly of the proposed location with a maximum height of 77 feet to the top of facility, finding the project to be categorically exempt from environmental review pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act guidelines, section 15303, and approve resolution 2020 next in order for planning and zoning permit number 1853001, subject to certain findings and conditions, with a modification to condition 24, and I could read that in a second as I flip back to it, and striking out condition number 25. Condition 24, just to be clear on the record, would read, in order to be less prominently visible from the financial square right-of-way, the proposed wireless communications facility shall be located on the eastern side of the existing building in a location that is approximately no less than 50 feet northerly of the proposed location at the southeast corner of the building. The exact location shall be reviewed and approved by the planning manager prior to the applicant submitting construction plans to Building and Engineering Division for plan check. End stop.
Thank you, Mr. Kolowitz. Vice Chair, that is the motion that I'm putting forth.
And I'd like to second that, Vice Chair.
Commissioner Chavez,
Aye.
Commissioner Dozier,
Yes.
Commissioner Fearing, Commissioner Fearing,
Can't hear you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Meyer,
Yes.
Vice Chair Sanchez.
Yes.
Motion passes. The decision of the Planning Commission is final unless appealed to the City Council within 18 days.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have a little bit more of a, we have items G, H, I, and J.
So Vice Chair Sanchez, if I could help out here a little bit.
Okay.
Item G is our study sessions and reports item. We do not have any items to report out to you tonight, which would move us on to item H, which is the Planning Commission business. So we turn that over to the Planning Commission.
Anything to report by any of the planning commissioners tonight? Commissioner Chavez?
Thank you, Vice Chair, and I'm sorry, fellow commissioners and staff, I know it's late. But I'm hoping that staff can bring back at a future meeting the ordinance that deals with elevators and new constructions. I know new constructions that are 3 stories aren't required to have elevators, and seeing how our city is now moving in an upward built, it would be, I think, beneficial to reconsider that ordinance or that policy that says that anything 3 stories or under does not require an elevator. I would also like to know at a future date in regards to the city's role when it deals with vacant buildings and land lots. If we have any ability to, I don't want to say force, but speak to the owners of those buildings or properties about either building or doing something with it. As we all know that a lot of times when something's vacant, it attracts crime. And, you know, we heard during public comments, one of the speakers talking about vacant buildings and lots in South Oxnard, and South Oxnard is the older part of our city. So I want to really try to figure out what our role is as a city to be able to try to get these buildings built out or lands built or something done so that our residents throughout the whole city can reap the benefits of development throughout the city. And those are the only comments that I have. Thank you, staff. Thank you, Vice Chair, and my fellow commissioners.
Are there any other comments by planning commissioners? Okay, we go to I, development, community development staff updates.
Just one for you. Your next meeting is 2 weeks from now on the 19th. We'll start at 6 o'clock.
Okay, thank you. So unless there's anything else, it's time to adjourn, it looks like. Have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you, commissioners. Thank you, staff.
Thank you, staff.
Good work.